Hello, everybody. Hello, hello, hello. I'll wait till a couple of people come on in and then we will get started. Thank you so very much for your support of Vision of Promise LLC. My name is DeShara Doub, and I'm the founder and chief executive officer. And I am extremely excited about this conversation around end of life planning. So I'll wait till a couple people come in and then we will go ahead and get started. Again, thank you so very much for your support of Vision of Promise LLC. Again, my name is DeShara Dobb, and I want to tell you just a little bit about my background and what has led this passion of end of life planning for me. I am a social worker and a marriage and family therapist by trade. And throughout my time on the journey of seeking to gain higher education in helping people, I've had an array of experiences. I am a second generation funeral home director. I also had a very unique experience of being a hospital chaplain where I worked from oncology, neonatal, and palliative care. And in that experience, I saw so many people that was at the end of life. And at that time, they were not emotionally or mentally in a place to really prepare and to really not only prepare their loved ones at that time, but just not prepare to wrap their mind around one, the state of their health, but then also not really prepared to write things down, maybe remember certain private things that have happened their entire life to be able to pass on to someone else. And so in that process, I really became passionate about educating people around this idea of end of life planning when you're at the peak of your life. Vision of Promise LLC is about holistic care. So we don't want someone when they're at that pinnacle stage where they're almost at that cliff, when they are at that, again, that end of life stage. We want to think about those things when we are at a good space in our life, when we are at a place where we are clear, where we're able to plan effectively, and we're able to research, ask questions, write some stuff down, go away from it, come back, revise it. We want to be able to have that opportunity to do that. And if you think about end of life planning, it is no easy conversation. And that's one piece that I want to make sure that I am bringing awareness for everyone that is viewing this, is that talking about death is not easy for anyone. Everyone that views this have lost something or someone before. And if you think about just briefly that moment in that period of time, sometimes we couldn't even wrap our head around trying to not only plan a homegoing service, a funeral, a memorial, but then also if you're thinking about as well, you aren't at a space to think about that, oh my God, where is mama's checkbook? Or where are the life insurance policies? What organizations were my uncle or cousin involved with, and how do I contact them so they can get those final rights that they so well deserve? All these things are not in the forethought of someone's mind when they have lost a loved one. And so my hope today is, again, to begin to start thinking about, what does that look like? What does end of life planning look like for someone? So again, thank you so very much for your support. And let's go ahead and get started with the conversation. One thing I do want to make you aware of, again, Vision of Promise LLC does have end of life planning consultations and presentations that we do. And so I will be giving you a snippet of what these consultations look like. Again, the purpose of this live is just to provide some general information. A lot of these things might apply to you and it might not, but again, it's very important to have those kind of conversations based off of what your individualized experience is. So I definitely encourage you to visit our website, www.thevisionofpromise.com. We have an end of life planning page. It gives you a ton of information and some ideas of the things that we cover during our consultations and also our presentations. So we're not just for individuals, couples, and families, but we're for the entire community. And so definitely utilize our services. We will be happy to serve you. So again, as I was preparing for the live tonight, there were some things that I was thinking about. One is, why is there such stigma around people talking about end of life? Sometimes, again, as I mentioned earlier, it's a difficult conversation to have. Who wants to talk about death, the process of grieving, final plans when someone is at the peak of their life? Who wants to have those conversations when they're not sick, when they don't have to consider, oh, I have X amount of time before I go to this next phase of the universe? It's a lot of stigma around that, but I want to offer you an opportunity to consider, why not plan for it when you are in good health and wellness? Why not have that as an opportunity to reflect upon what you've accomplished in your life? What legacy do you want to leave for your loved ones, for the individuals that's going to be behind that might not have had the opportunity to tell you how they felt or really share in the victories of your life's journey? And so I think that, again, this stigma of end of life conversations, my hope is to debunk those. And as I mentioned earlier, in my experience with being a hospital chaplain, you don't want to get to a point where when you're having to consider end of life planning is when you're there. You don't have the wherewithal, you don't have the emotional and mental strength to begin to write those pinnacle things down for your loved ones. Everyone is very high emotion. People are trying to figure out plans, starting to make phone calls, trying to figure out about medical care, whatever the case may be. And so these little intricate details might not be of importance right at that moment. And one thing I do want to offer you as well is to consider that we do not know when our time will come. As a hospital chaplain, I was in the neonatal unit with infants. Who could imagine that their life would end so abruptly and so soon? I think in our minds, we think of end of life as being for the elderly, for the individuals that have lived a full life. But that's not always the case. And so I think it's very important for even myself. I have an end of life plan and I've shared it with my loved ones. So I definitely would encourage you to consider that as we move forward with this live. So interesting enough, the whole concept around end of life planning has been such a hot topic recently. Within the music community, we've lost a diva and a legend in her own right, Aretha Franklin. And during her funeral, there was a lot of conversation not only about her clothes changes, her lying within the African American Museum in Detroit, the 6-hour funeral service, the pomp and circumstance around that service. A lot of people do not realize that when Miss Franklin was in sound mind and sound body, these plans was already being put into place. So as her family was grieving, the time for her to go, again, we found out that she had cancer. And so, when she was at the phase of slowly dwindling this natural earth, that wasn't the time for her to put down pen to paper on the things that she wanted or her family to even have those discussions. These are things that she planned well in advance to not only have those intricate details of things that she desired, but also the financial backing of that. And I think a lot of times when we talk about end of life planning, we don't consider the financial pieces that we have to plan for. And so that's one thing that I want us to also think about too, is there is major intricate parts of end of life planning. One major one is the plan itself, is the pen to paper, is those details of things that will be important for your next of kin, or your power of attorney, or whoever you have designated as your individual that will be handling your final affairs. But then that next piece is that financial piece. As we know, if you've had the experience of doing any type of funeral planning, the cost of a funeral is skyrocketing as the years go by. Right now, on average, it's about tens of thousands of dollars. And even if you have a pauper's funeral, which is something very basic, very low, typically the state or a coroner's office typically handles those types of pieces. That's even a couple of hundreds of dollars. And so if you don't have that plan in place regarding how to handle those expenses, we have the situations of the GoFundMe's. We have the situations of, the, hey, can we get a donation for brother or sister so and so? And so if we also know is that when we're getting close to that end of life planning and someone has passed, there is an X amount of time window that a funeral home will give a family, a coroner's office will give a family, a hospital will give a family to make that final decision, because it's a ticking time clock. And also a cumulative costs will accrue based off of the additional time that it might take for you to make a plan. So again, in the long run, that kind of intricate planning ahead of time definitely provides that opportunity to kind of put things into place ahead of time. So again, as your family is grieving and giving them that space to do that, all they have to do is go in mama's drawer or go in daddy's toolbox, or wherever you decide to leave that document, go ahead and pull it out from that envelope, and all they have to do is do step by step. So they are able to, again, effectively grieve and also give you your desires. And so, interesting enough, I was reading a Huffington Post article, and it was mentioning that about 90% of Americans believe it's important to have an end of life plan or end of life conversations with their loved ones, but only 30% of people do it. I think a lot of times we take advantage of the time that we have, right? We know people, we see the news, we're in a technological age. We see on social media that within a blink of an eye, something can happen to someone. I think in our minds, we would love to have the long life and we go peacefully. But the reality is that there are many people of all ages that leave home one day and unfortunately never come back. And so again, the delay in having those conversations have been of a detriment to a lot of people. And so the Vision of Promises hope is that, again, we begin to debunk that idea of waiting and prolonging those conversations. And so I thought it was really interesting that out of 90% of people that really wholeheartedly believe in having those dialogues, only 30% of people do it. And that's really unfortunate. So again, I want to go over what is end of life planning. What does that look like? And it's several pieces to it. And again, I'm giving you general tips, but I definitely encourage you to contact us directly to schedule a consultation so we can go over your individual end of life plan. And I think this is such a wonderful thing, and I'm so proud of this. We have a Prepare for the Beyond funeral planning guide that we provide for our clients during their consultations. And so everything I'm talking about this evening and more will be discussed, and you can actually put pen to paper, and all this is a fill it out kind of a guide. And so we are very proud of this, and I'm very excited. And so again, schedule your consultation, www.thevisionofpromise.com. We do a free 20-minute consultation, and again, having that conversation, not by yourself, but again, we can help facilitate that with your loved ones and your family or even your community on how we get started on those individual plans. So again, what does end of life planning look like? One piece is advanced directives. And for you all that have never had an opportunity to engage in this, it is all about medical treatment. Um, do not resuscitate is typically about around advanced directives. The ability to make the decision around artificial food and water. Um, if you are in a situation where you possibly have to be on life support, you get to make that call of what that looks like. Again, this medical document, this is something that you give a hospital, your doctor directly, and also you designate a person, a loved one, family member, friend, that will be of sound mind, to be able to have that conversation with your medical professional when that time comes. So I think it's very important to have an advance directive. The second piece is finances and debts. Now, we're all grown, we all have different life circumstances. So think about not only life insurance, I think that that's something that's talked about fairly frequently, but a lot of policies, if you look at that fine print, some of them have clauses. For example, some life insurance policies don't cover accidents, right? So say if there was an accident at work, an accident in your car, sometimes that life insurance does not cover those types of matters of death, as is called in your policy. Sometimes also with life insurance, sometimes it only covers a certain amount after a period of time. And so I think it's very important for, if you have not already, to review your policy and kind of look at what does it entail. A lot of times, if you already have a diagnosed illness, the life insurance has a clause that they will not be responsible for having that payout. So again, we have to kind of consider those financial means, with not only when it comes to kind of that funeral planning as people consider it, but also think about like those medical costs possibly that will be associated with. If you have to get picked up from an ambulance fees are hundreds and hundreds of dollars on its own. And then consider hospital stays, different medications and treatment, possible surgeries, things of that nature. These are things that your loved ones will have to attend to when you're gone. So again, look at your life insurance policies and its stipulations. Sometimes you have to make adjustments, maybe have several policies in place, to have that preparatory piece of how would you consider, just covering all your bases for your loved ones. Your bank accounts. Now, again, as adults, bank account information, that is highly confidential. If you don't have a life partner or children or someone that you trust, most times people don't know what bank you even bank with, right? They don't have access to your bank cards. They might not even know a PIN number, let alone how to access money. So again, in an end of life plan, we have to begin to consider kind of things pen to paper, like, oh, I have a checking account with XYZ credit union, right, that I don't even use. I have my rainy day fund over here. Maybe I have my my business checks direct deposit into another account. I might have a savings account over here. These are things we also have to consider when we talk about end of life planning, because push come to shove, you don't know what state your loved ones will be in when that time comes. And so there might have to be a quick access to some cash, whether it's to travel somewhere, whether it's, I got to go pick up someone, and they don't have, money for a taxi, or they don't have money to have a hotel, those types of pieces. These are things that are not covered in life insurance. So again, having kind of those documents in place of not only your banking information, PIN numbers, but also have a power of attorney on paper. And again, I'll talk about that in a little bit. But again, making sure that you have all those things in place for your loved one. Your properties. Many people own property, and because again, sometimes that's in secret. A lot of people don't know that someone has a deed to their home or where the deed is for your next of kin, your loved one, whoever the case may be. And so again, that's important to also have as a part of your end of life plan. A lot of homeowners have specific insurance that covers if something happens to them, maybe the deed to their home will get completely covered. So there's no more debt on that home. So again, consider those types of things as a homeowner, and also being able to stipulate, who's your property manager. Maybe how much at the time of you writing that document, how much do you owe on your home? Who is the point of contact? If you don't live in that home, maybe if it's rented or whatever the case may be, you want to kind of consider those things. And finally, unfortunately, we have to talk about big debt a lot, right? Student loans, your car debt, some of your home debt. These are things that a lot of times when we talk about end of life, we don't consider. Those big debts that our next of kin is going to roll over right to their name, right? And so we don't even consider when someone passes away, that next of kin has to also file taxes on behalf of that person. And so again, when we think about that end of life planning piece, we have to kind of think of those intricate things. It's not just the funeral planning or the homegoing planning. It's those pieces when the phone calls stop, when the person is has their disposition options and they are, resting in their home with the universe. There's a lot of grief and sorrow, not just with that person's passing, but all the things that the person never knew that this person was leaving behind. And so, these are things that I will definitely recommend for you to consider. Wills and testaments. One of my favorite TV shows is The Will. It's about celebrities that never had a will written, and the kind of all this controversy around who has ownership of this, that, who has, their the value of, whatever said item or property. But this is a real life situation. And going back to the Aretha Franklin reference earlier, one of the big hot topics in the news was the fact that she did not have a will. Now, again, everything is very state-based, so I want us to keep that in mind during this live. You have to look at what your state indicators are when it comes to wills and what happens when you don't have one in place. But a lot of states, if you do not specify who X, Y, and Z goes to, it will go to the next of kin. It might go to a parent. Say if all those individuals is no longer with us, it could be awarded the state. It can just be out there for whoever claims it. And again, that could be a very long and tedious process. So again, talking to a lawyer, writing down who is going to take ownership of my home that I've worked so hard for, who is going to take ownership of X amounts of thousands of dollars that I have saved, and how is this going to be allocated? Who's going to be the individuals that's going to take care of maybe my business, my properties? Who's going to handle those things? So again, wills are very critical and very important, particularly for a lot of single people. If you think about it, if you are not married or if you don't have any children, who is going to handle your final affairs? And I think sometimes we don't consider that. We think about, oh, it'll just be, mama, it'll be my brother, it'll be whoever. But what happens when all those people are no longer here and you don't have those contingency plans of, my dear friend, my dear loved one will be able to, handle it while grieving? Because again, we have to consider that through all of this, the person or the persons that's going to be ultimately responsible for your end of life planning is going to be grieving the loss of you. So again, a last will is definitely very critical. Um, and of course, funeral planning. That's the common one. So a lot of people don't consider possibly writing their own obituary. If you think about it, if newspapers, that hard copy newspaper isn't as popular as it once was. So how does someone notify the public of your passing? Right? I think a lot of times people don't think that. In the age of social media, that a lot of times we find out that someone has departed on a Facebook post, right? And sometimes that can be very insensitive for people. So, how would someone notify them? Is it through the online platform of a newspaper? Is it through the funeral home's website? Are you making personal phone calls to people? Again, these are things that you have to consider, right? Um, and again, when that news is unexpected, you have to consider, one, a lot of times people don't know those intricate details of your life to be able to put on paper for an obituary, right? Again, most people know when someone is born, maybe their parents' name, possibly maybe their career, and maybe if they had any children, but that's about it. But what about those life accolades? What about those honors you received, that business you started, that degree or degrees that you're proud of? So those organizations, those leadership opportunities that you've had. So again, I think that is even a nice reflective activity. Again, this is something that I give to my clients to kind of reflect on your life and what you hope to accomplish. And sometimes that can turn into a memorial for that person when that person is gone. And again, make it unique to you. Again, a lot of times people don't know someone's family tree. I think sometimes we take that for granted, thinking that someone just automatically knows about our personal lives, right? There's always that piece at an obituary of, this person is preceded in death by the people that have passed on prior to that person. A lot of times, say if you have younger children, they don't know that your grandmother was the biggest influence on your life, and maybe they don't even know what grandma's legal name was to even have it written down, right? Sometimes kids don't even know their parents' legal names. So consider, if your children has to write an obituary for you, what would that look like? So again, just that little intricate piece can be such a huge weight off of someone that's in the midst of the grieving process. Plots and burial options. A lot of families have family plots. And, sometimes it comes in a set of four. Say if a person has passed on and they have three plots left, a lot of times people don't even have that information on hand. So someone goes and buys another plot, not knowing that there were already three plots that were already paid for. So again, those entombment options, and again, burial is not the only one. Of course, there's cremation. Of course, there's disposition within a crypt or something of that sort. Now, again, it's very important that if you happen to have paid for that ahead of time, or say mama or grandma paid for some type of family, multiple disposition options, then it's important to also document that so that person can go to the funeral home and say, hey, we already have a plot taken care of. All we have to do is pay for the opening and closing. Again, that saves a ton of money for you and your family. Again, going back to Aretha Franklin, the clothes, sometimes the jewelry, the colors, um, how you want to be laid out, maybe the music that wants to be played, the flowers. These are things that again is those kind of physical or those showpieces, but it's a representation of that person. So if you had an opportunity to look on TV or see pictures, I mean, it was very extravagant, very beautiful on the eye, and it was a representation of her legacy. And a lot of times, when people go to funerals, sometimes even seeing those types of things brings such a comfort to someone to see their face. Think about some organizations. This is a huge one. A lot of times people don't think about all the organizations or leadership opportunities that someone has been a part of, right? So how do you contact said organization? What is the process of this person getting their last rites ceremony? This has happened so many times. As a person that's a part of not only fraternal organizations, but also a sorority, many people unfortunately pass and their family doesn't consider, oh, I have to make this request of said organization. If you have loved ones that are not a part of these fraternal organizations or organizations in general where you served in leadership, they don't know who to contact or how to request that type of information. So again, putting down on paper who will be possibly the point of contact. The points of contacts can change. Maybe it's the headquarters of your organization. Maybe it's a person representing that state. Again, these are things that, you know, your homegoing service is for the people that's remaining. And so what a beautiful legacy to leave if all the organizations that you've been a part of can have a moment to pay homage and thank you for your service to them. So again, just little pieces like that. One of the other things that I thought was just so beautiful and amazing that I've seen recently is for individuals to write letters to their loved ones. Now, again, some people can have some connotations about this. They can feel maybe a little awkward about this because writing letters or doing planning doesn't necessarily mean that that person is ready to go. It don't mean anything like that. It could be of, I want to give a gift to my loved ones, to have things on paper and to plan, because I don't want to have you have yet one more burden to deal with while you grieve. You know, we can't control how we go, and we can't control what happens after we gone. So a lot of people write letters, you know, letting that loved one know how much they appreciate them, you know, how difficult this might be for them, but this is what I wanted to leave you. You know, one of the things that I have thought about personally is maybe offering to have my loved one to go on vacation. Maybe that's something that I saved up for that individual to be able to do because that was something that I loved and enjoyed. So again, these are some opportunities for you to kind of think of when it comes to that regard. Is again, just what are some of the things that end of life planning consists of? It doesn't have to be morbid. It doesn't have to be sad. It can be, again, those opportunities to kind of consider what is going to be happy, you know, and what's going to leave that legacy for your family. And again, as I'm going on, if you have any questions, you're more than welcome to type them into the chat, and I'll be more than happy to answer them. So don't feel like that you're interrupting me. I can definitely ask and pause what I'm saying to be able to answer your questions. So what are some of the common mistakes? Again, I mentioned this Huffington Post article that I've read in the recent, and it actually has 6 common mistakes to avoid when creating an end of life plan. And I thought this was so interesting. I wanted to share. One, putting it off until later. As I mentioned earlier, we do not know when our time will come. We have no idea. And again, we have to be mindful that when we are in good health, that is the best time to be able to really plan. Again, would you plan a vacation like, oh, I think I want to go on vacation, but I want to go on vacation tomorrow, but I don't know where I'm going to stay. I don't know where the money comes from. Of course not, you know. But again, we want to have, you know, kind of put pen to paper, kind of look at it, walk away, come back, maybe come up with something new. So again, not waiting until later to plan. Choosing the wrong healthcare proxy. Now, this is a piece that I was mentioning earlier regarding the advance directive. One of the things people have to consider is that when a person is your healthcare proxy, they're the person that's going to have to make sure that what your desires are come to fruition. So say, for example, that do not resuscitate. That person is going to, as difficult as it is to see and to experience, that person is going to say, hey, doctors, um, you know, my said loved one, you know, that's not what they desire. And so, you know, I want to be able to respect their wishes. Um, We do have a question about the paying taxes for your loved one. Yes, so actually, according to the Internal Revenue Service, if that individual passes away, their next of kin will have to file taxes on their behalf to be able to close out their taxes. So I know this sounds really weird, but that's why it's really important to kind of write down not only like who your employer is and the contact information for them, because of course, if you're an actively working person and say you don't come to work for, a couple of days, sometimes your emergency contact isn't necessarily your next of kin. And so it's important for that person to make that contact directly with your employer. But yes, at the end of the year, you will still get a W-2. You will still get those tax documents, and that person is going to have to be responsible for filing your taxes. So if you consider property taxes, if that person is still going to keep that residence, they're going to be responsible for that. Any type of debts, medical bills, student loans, all those things, as well as your state and federal taxes, that person is still going to have to file on your behalf. Now, of course, when you file, there is a section to say, yeah, this person is deceased. They do have that piece on there. And so, yeah, that's going to have to be a portion that your loved one is going to have to attend to. So say if you owe taxes, that next of kin is ultimately going to be responsible for ensuring that your taxes are covered. So I think a lot of times we don't even think about that in regards to when someone owes a debt. Some places like federal student loans have a forgiveness clause when it comes to, disability and death, but some don't, right? And so, yes, that is definitely a huge piece that a lot of times we don't think about when it comes to that end of life planning. So, absolutely, that is a portion. And if you want to know more information about that, I would definitely encourage you to Google the Internal Revenue Service and look at their clause regarding deceased individuals filing their taxes. They can provide, they actually have a stipulation. Now, again, everything is year to year, so you can just get like a snapshot of what it could potentially look like. But that's something that kind of can give you an idea of what that will look like. So absolutely. Yes, if you have any more questions, feel free to type it in the chat. So mentioning about, again, the healthcare proxy. Yes, I mean, I saw that so many times as I was a hospital chaplain. It is very challenging to be in a space and a doctor is telling you that, your loved one has a matter of time, whether that person is able to communicate on their own or they're unable to. But that healthcare proxy is going to have to be that person that's ultimately ensuring that your desires are met. And then in an unfortunate circumstance, if you don't have those things written down on paper, the healthcare proxy is going to have to be the person to make decisions. And so I hope that none of us have had to deal with this. But I did have a situation where there was an entire family with several siblings that was attending to their parent, and their parent was unable to respond for themselves. And so when it came to that time of, what are we going to do? Are we going to have the palliative care option where we're keeping them comfortable? Are we going to put them on life support? Are we just going to, call it at this time? And there was a huge blow up about it. And so we have to consider those things, like in the midst of grief, there's several stages of it. It can come out as anger. It can come out in complete sadness. We never know how that will look until we're actually in that situation. So again, you're preventing kind of those pieces from falling apart. And so having something in writing can definitely ensure that even when people are unable to be of sound mind and body and spirit at that time, they can definitely be able to still proceed on with your medical wishes. Some people get lost in the details. As I mentioned earlier, sometimes people don't think about end of life planning being kind of those financial pieces or considering debts. A lot of people just think about funeral planning. And the reality is, and as a full disclaimer, I am not bashing or discrediting any type of funeral home. But the reality is, funeral homes are businesses, right? And so they are trained just as hospital chaplains are trained, just as therapists are trained, just as most pastors are trained to, again, provide that empathy for someone and those soft skills to be able to navigate someone during that difficult time. But at the end of the day, they still have to handle the business of death, right? And so when you go to a funeral home, they're not like, oh, we'll take care of, your loved one's funeral plot, or their casket, or their, the flowers and the programs. That hardly ever happens, if at all, right? And so we have to, again, consider thinking about those things in regards to not getting caught in those finite details regarding, oh, I want, this color casket, this color flowers. We have to think about everything holistically. A question: if you don't get a will or something legal to leave behind, what about a video you record to say you want to happen with your belongings and money? Okay, so that's a very interesting point, because again, we live in a technological age. That's definitely something you can do. I've seen that, not personally, but I've seen a documentary when someone has left kind of a video message. Now, the only piece to that is, whether it's written or in a video, you're going to have to make sure that you designate somebody that's responsible. Most times, a person will designate that to a representative. So they'll make sure that they document that. They have to, of course, sometimes give a disclaimer with a video message saying, I'm in, sound mind and body to, produce this message regarding my last will and testament. So they have like some legalities that you have to put in, some type of technology regarding that. But I don't see why not. Again, I would definitely have a conversation with some type of lawyer, especially depending on what you'll be leaving behind. If it's a business, if it's a lot of money. Again, people don't even think about, when you're leaving people a lot of money, sometimes they have taxes that they have to take out for that. So I would definitely recommend talking to a lawyer. But I think that is a very unique idea to have a video. And again, that's a nice touch to leave with your loved one, to, remember you by, hear your voice, see your smile, see your face. I think that can be really comforting too. That's a really good question. Um, Another common mistake that people make is not discussing your plans with your doctor. Now, the advance directive piece, again, depending on your state, it has to be someone that's certified to do that. Some states you can just actually Google an advance directive, have it written down, go to a notary public, have them to stamp it, and then you can give it to your doctor. Again, I would definitely check your state regarding that. But a lot of people do not consider giving their advance directive to their doctor. And it's really unfortunate, because a lot of people don't realize, um, whether you get an autopsy or not, your primary care doctor is going to be the person that's going to sign off on your your birth certificate, your death certificate. And so whatever health problems or things that they was made aware of, they would actually put that on that document. But it's really important, because ultimately, excuse me, whether it's unexpected or it's a long-term, decline, your doctor is going to be involved in some type of matter within those steps. And so it's really important for your doctor to have on your file your advance directive. And again, as a hospital chaplain, a lot of people gave it directly to the hospital. Say if you have a preferred hospital that you go to, you can just have that with your records, and that's something that they can pull up immediately when you actually are, entered into that hospital. Another common mistake, a common mistake, not expressing your wishes to your loved ones. As I mentioned, there is a huge stigma around talking about end of life. A lot of people sometimes don't have the wherewithal to talk about it. Sometimes loved ones don't want to hear their mom, their their loved one, their spouse, the love of their life. They don't want to hear them talk about end of life, right? But it's such a critical conversation. And so unfortunately, a lot of times people have ideas in their mind of what they would like, but then they don't have an opportunity to write it down on paper and it gets too late. Um, okay, so who signs your death certificate if you do not have a primary care doctor? That's a very good question. Typically, the doctor on call or the emergency room doctor is the people that sign off on it. If by chance, say if you don't have insurance or something like that, they do have a designated doctor. Typically, it's the person that's on call that night that makes that final call. It also happens to say if you're in a medical state that they have to determine you. They call it brain dead. So that physician at that time is the person that actually goes through those steps to make that final call. So it doesn't have to necessarily be your primary care doctor. That's the common thing. But say if you don't have one on record, then it'll definitely be that attending physician. That's a good question. And finally, the other common mistake that people have when they create an end of life plan is not updating their preferences in a timely manner. So think about, I would say I'm fairly young right now, and I have an end of life plan. And of course, I don't plan on going anytime soon. Let's say I wrote it right now, and maybe I have another 30 or 40 years, and I have never updated my plan. By the time that time comes, I might not even want to wear yellow or something, or I might want to be cremated instead of buried. Who knows? I think it's very important that once you put that information down on paper, that you again go back to it. They say on average about every 5 years. But think about, I would definitely say when you have a different life state. So say if you get married, say if you have children, whether it's by birth, adoption, whatever the case is, you move to another state, that can definitely change a lot of things. Your financial situation is different. Say if someone that you designated passes away, of course you wouldn't, change your plan right then and there, but it's definitely something over time that will be important for you to update. Say, oh, I want, X person to be my healthcare proxy, and that person is no longer here. Then again, it provides that gap for, oh, well, this person no longer here. So who's the next of kin? And as I mentioned earlier, say if you don't have children, who that next of kin looks like. Say if you don't have children or you don't have, a life partner, who's going to be that person? And I think that's something that, single people and people in general really have to consider. And so, again, I think that these conversations are so critical and so important. And again, I recognize that these conversations are not easy to have. It's not easy to have when you are in good health and strength. It's not easy to have when you recognize that your loved one is close to the end of their life. A lot of people don't have acceptance around that. And one thing, as a marriage and family therapist, I tell people all the time, grief is not just for the people that are left behind. A lot of times, the person that is actually dying is also grieving, especially if they recognize that they are deteriorating. I mean, that is it is so much psychology around just coming to a place where, okay, I'm ready. I have everything in place. I feel good. I can be at peace now, and so I will highly encourage you to share this live with your loved ones, refer back to it. Definitely, I'll encourage you to, this coming Sunday at the dinner table, to ask, like, I've been thinking about end of life planning, and no, nothing's wrong with me. No, I definitely want to live a long life, but I think it's something that we definitely need to, have conversations about. It's a mature conversation. It's a needed conversation as a professional, as a person that leaves a legacy behind, to discuss what do we want to do when that time comes. Again, it could be a very hard conversation, but I will personally commit to you, the vision of promise. We don't want you to walk down that path alone. And so I will highly encourage you, if this is a conversation that touch you in any particular way, you are more than welcome to contact us directly. We have a website, www.thevisionofpromise.com. We have a whole page on end of life planning. We have consultations for individuals, couples, and families, and we also have presentations for entire communities. So again, you do not have to have this conversation alone, and we our services debunk the myths of not only end of life conversations, but just holistic and mental health services in general. Here's another comment. Make sure you have someone on your bank records. If you don't have anyone, you can't close the account. Absolutely. That is a very good point. And sometimes while people are still here, they don't want someone's name on it. So an alternative to that is to have a power of attorney. That is an alternative. So you can actually designate someone on a power of attorney, get it notarized, and you can have it at your bank. So say if you don't want that person to have access right at this very moment, but if the worst case scenario, if you're unable to make that decision on your own or go to the bank on your own, that person that is your power of attorney has that document. They can take it directly to the bank with their ID, and they can be able to make those bank transactions on your behalf. So that is a very good point. Power of attorneys is something that, again, goes along with last will and testaments that I will definitely recommend for you to contact a lawyer about. It is highly important. And yes, absolutely. Sometimes even the power of attorney is not in a good place to be able to make those decisions. And sometimes it has to be another relative or an individual that can be able, that needs to handle those affairs. So that's why I think it is really, really important, whether you've had to deal with it yourself or not, to have that piece of paper, have that document in place when you are able to think clearly about, okay, if this person is maybe unable to, be in a space where they can make that decision, who's going to be the next person? Who's going to be the next person? Again, we have to consider, even having this conversation, I want to be mindful of how it can spark up different feelings for people. I'm able to have these conversations very succinctly and very clearly because I've been in experiences personally and professionally that prepared me to prepare other people, right? This didn't just happen yesterday for me, where I'm able to have these conversations and actually put pen to paper and help people to navigate it, because it is very hard. I believe it takes someone that is very empathetic, and someone that not only has engaged in that experience, whether personally or professionally, but can be able to understand where you're coming from and be able to help you navigate that. Sometimes people can't talk, right? And so sometimes you have to have, I call it a buffer person. I have been in situations, and I'll speak on this as a professional, and also personal. I have had to be the person to be in the room with someone at the hospital when they're calling their loved one at their time of death. I've had to be the person to sit in with a doctor when they tell their loved one that their person has passed on. I've even had to be that person to go to the funeral home and make sure that that person is of clear mind regarding the finances of that memorial service. Of, we can't get the top notch, casket. We have to be realistic about, the needs. I've had to be that person, and I think that it's really important as you're even thinking about end of life planning of who can that person be for you. Whether it's you having to do it for your loved one, or if it's your loved ones having to do that because you're gone. So I think it's very important for you to, begin thinking about that. What a gift it is for you to leave a legacy for your loved ones that they can effectively grieve. I mean, think about that. When we're in the process of grieving and we are highly emotional, we can't think clearly. We can't be able to go through, our loved one's home and try to find that file cabinet that, they have had over the years, or go in somebody's basement or rumble through their bedroom. Like, we can't even think, like, where's that person's purse? Where's their wallet? Let me try to find X, Y, and Z card, document, whatever the case. So again, having those things in place ahead of time is just, I think it's just such a gift. And I think it's something that we have to debunk having these conversations, because a lot of people are getting hurt, right? They don't know when all this stuff is happening. They don't know when it's going to happen for them or their loved one. And then their loved one is sitting back and no one is calling no more. The flowers are gone, the meals, having that person checking in on you, it goes away. Realistically, it's not there for a long time. And when you're sitting back having to get mail still, and like I mentioned about the filing of the taxes, you still having to do that and having to not only deal with your taxes, but also deal with someone else's taxes, it could be a lot. Great point. Military individuals, that conversation happens a lot when people go on deployment, of being able to put things on paper of what would you want to say, because the reality is, we think of the military of, you never know how that person is going to come back home. It might not even be a physical departure. It might be a disability. It might be a mental illness and disruption that comes along with them back home. And so sometimes we have to really consider those things, as individuals, as adults. And so, as you see, I'm extremely passionate about this topic, and I am so grateful to each of you who took time out this evening on this live. Again, if you have any questions, I'll be on here for a few more minutes to answer any of your questions. But while I wait, again, Vision of Promise com. Please go on our website, click on our end of life planning. We have consultations for individuals, couples, and families. We have presentations. I have given them at churches. I have given them to organizations. It's an important conversation to have, and sometimes we don't think about that. And when you have a consultation, I have prepared a Preparing for the Beyond, a funeral planning guide. It's right here. This can be the legacy you pass on to your loved one. Everything in this document is everything that I have been talking about in this live. So again, how easy would it be, just an hour and a half of your time, to set up a consultation for a professional to be able to guide you through, okay, these are some of the things you can consider. What does this look like? Your passwords. We haven't even talked about that. Think about passwords. A lot of people, we have cell phones. This is a technological age. Some people have, an app that has all their passwords on it. But if someone doesn't know how to access your phone, or doesn't know where to get your passwords from, your computer is going to lie dormant. Your phone is going to lie dormant. They don't know who to call because maybe you haven't written it down. We don't live in the age anymore where people have phone books very often, right? And so these are things, again, you can consider. So again, this funeral planning guide, I've worked so tirelessly and so hard on this, and I'm so excited to share this with each of you. So again, thank you so very much for your support. Share this live with your loved ones, with your family. Refer back to it. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. I'm available at thevisionofpromise@gmail.com. Also, our website, www.thevisionofpromise.com. Also, again, Facebook. Keep updated on here. Share it. I'm a business owner. I want to get this out to as many people as possible. This is such a needed conversation and such a needed service for the community. So again, share this with your loved ones. If you have any questions, I am available for community presentations. I am available to travel. So at any point in time, I am available to you. So again, thank you so very much for your time. If you have any questions, continue the conversation through the chat. I can be on here answering questions virtually. So again, thank you so very much and have a good evening.